Tonight, the first steps towards gun reform in the U.S. in decades.
To deliver literally nothing again was just too hard a prospect to contemplate.
After years of stalemate and mass shootings, a small group of senators has come to an agreement.
If this stops the next Parkland from happening, it's progress.
Why small change has big meaning for some. A deadly explosion in Vancouver traced to a battery. What you need to know about charging heavy-duty lithium batteries at home. And
as you can see, this eye is not blinking.
Justin Bieber's rare neurological disorder explained. This is The National. Good evening, I'm Hanomansing. Tonight in Washington, signs that this time really might be different. After decades of violent deaths, outcry, and activism, the federal government may be moving towards stricter regulations on guns. A group of both Democrat and Republican senators say they have agreed, at least in principle, on a limited deal on gun control. On paper, it's a tiny step, mostly strengthening background checks, but for a Congress long paralyzed by partisanship, any step would be significant. Makta Geberselassie starts us off tonight with the details of the breakthrough, the reaction, and what comes next.
While tens of thousands of Americans marched against gun violence this weekend,
I'm a teacher and I do not want to have to worry about guns in our classroom.
A bipartisan group of senators worked to come to an agreement on gun restrictions. The scope narrow, but if passed into law, advocates say it would be the first significant gun reform in decades. On the table, strengthening background checks for gun buyers under 21, including searching juvenile records, funding for mental health programs and school security, and a grant program to encourage all states to put red flag laws into place. Those laws allow police to take guns away from someone deemed to be a danger to themselves or others by a judge. Modest moves, but a Democratic senator in the group said getting a deal that could actually get passed was the goal.
To deliver literally nothing again was just too hard a prospect to contemplate.
Parkland school shooting survivor David Hogg applauds the effort.
But if this stops the next Parkland from happening, or even just one more Parkland from happening, or one more shooting from happening, it's progress.
What's not in the deal? Increasing the minimum age to buy some semi-automatic rifles to 21 across the country, and no ban on assault weapons. And so after the massacres in Buffalo and Uvalde, Texas, and on the 6th anniversary of the mass shooting at a gay club in Orlando, it's not enough for some.
You don't need weapons of war that can just mow down school children or concert goers or people at a nightclub. I mean, this is just, it just shouldn't be the way this country is.
President Joe Biden also wished there was more, but supports the agreement. Each day that passes, more children are killed in this country, he said. The sooner it comes to my desk, the sooner I can sign it, and the sooner we can use these measures to save lives.
Makta, what comes next in this process?
Well, a sweeping gun reform bill just passed by the House is expected to fail in the Senate. But this agreement here could actually work. They just need to work out the legislation. We do know, of course, that 10 Republicans that were part of this group of senators that helped craft this, they're obviously agreeing to this. And that is the number needed to get past the Senate filibuster. And House Leader Nancy Pelosi says they'll push it through as well. So Biden could sign this agreement into law. Small changes with big meaning for gun reform advocates.
All right, Makta, thank you. Police in Idaho arrested 31 members of a white supremacist group near a Pride event.
The quote that we received through dispatch was, it, quote, looked like a little army that was loading up into the vehicle. We thought appropriate to take adequate measures.
Someone in the city of Coeur d'Alene called police after spotting a group of men loading up a truck with shields. Police say the suspects came from 11 different states, part of a group called Patriot Front. The police chief says they were made aware of groups looking to disrupt the annual Pride in the Park event. The 31 were charged with conspiracy to riot, and they'll be in court tomorrow. As cases of monkeypox continue to spread here in Canada, so are the efforts to stop it. And today, there was a new vaccination clinic. There are at least 114 confirmed cases in this country, the vast majority in Quebec, but Ontario's count is still climbing, with at least 11 cases now confirmed in Toronto. So that is where the new vaccination clinic was set up today. And as Talia Ricci explains, there will be more to come.
When monkeypox first arrived in Toronto, community organizations leapt into action.
We have been really convening and I think importantly being able to inform Toronto Public Health on issues related to vaccine eligibility, the rollout.
On Sunday, that vaccine rollout began. The first shots going to people who work in bathhouses.
We were so encouraged to see the start of the vaccine clinic today at the bathhouse as really a space where information is shared, where education and awareness happens.
Vaccination efforts are well underway in Quebec.
We're close to 2,000 vaccines given in Quebec so far.
Monkeypox symptoms can include fever and muscle aches, and a rash that may spread all over the body but also might not. Health officials say the majority of cases being reported have been among men who have sex with men, though the virus can spread to anyone who has had close physical contact with an infected person.
I'm part of a demographic that's more at risk of catching the disease and perhaps spread it, so I felt like it was a citizen's duty to get vaccinated.
And at the moment, there is still a window of opportunity to prevent the onward spread of monkeypox in those who are at highest risk right now.
With Pride Month in full swing, Jane Griffiths says events and parties will be used to share information.
I don't think it's worry, but folks are definitely paying attention. Obviously, one of the biggest concerns was related to stigma. And as a community, we've experienced a lot of stigma and discrimination throughout our history.
Here in Toronto, Public Health says there will be several more vaccine clinics happening in the coming weeks to vaccinate those who have had close contact with someone who tested positive for the virus and people who are at higher risk of being exposed. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Police in Ottawa are continuing to investigate what led to a lockdown on Parliament Hill yesterday. That area was evacuated and nearby streets were shut down for about 3 hours after a tip about a potential threat came in from Canada Border Services Agency. Police say they found 2 people and 2 vehicles of interest. No arrests or charges have been announced. Multiple sources tell CBC News that police are now looking into whether a hoax or a bad tip may have been to blame. There are new warnings about some e-bike and e-scooter batteries tonight after a deadly weekend explosion in Vancouver. Leanne Young tells us when you need to use extra caution.
At this Vancouver bike store, if you bring in a non-name brand bike for repairs, prepare to pick it up before they close for the day.
We will not keep that e-bike in our store overnight because we have no idea about the battery.
Dragon is worried about poor quality lithium-ion batteries that can become unstable and catch fire. He says they're associated with lower-priced e-bikes and e-scooters.
If the bike is so cheap that it's too good to be true, it's so cheap for a reason, and the battery is the primary cost on a lot of those bikes.
As e-bikes have grown more popular, battery fires have become more frequent, and concern is growing. Fire officials from New York to Vancouver are reminding the public of potential dangers. This weekend, those dangers turned deadly in the downtown east side. A fire erupted at the Empress Hotel, a single-room occupancy building.
Investigations determined that it was a battery from an electric bike that was either being overcharged or something was not right with it and it exploded.
One person died after they fell from a second-floor window and 2 others were injured. Officials say the battery was also modified, something people do to make it last longer. A dangerous move, according to experts.
Lithium-ion batteries have limitations as to how quickly you can take energy out or put energy back in. If you take it out faster than the cell is capable, it overheats. If you put it back in faster than the cell can accept that energy, it overheats.
His advice is to always use the same charger that came with your device and charge in a place where you can get away safely if anything does happen. While the risk of fire is low, Dragon is still careful with his instructions to customers, starting with never charging it overnight.
Are you going to have an issue? Probably not. The chargers will shut themselves off, but everything can malfunction.
As they say, better to be safe than sorry. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's turn to the war in Ukraine. Hundreds of civilians are reportedly trapped as a brutal battle rages for control of the eastern part of the country as Russia tightens its grip on territory it controls in the south. The occupied Ukrainian city of Melitopol celebrated Russia Day. Its residents encouraged to watch, wave flags, even accept Russian passports. We see confidence, says this lawmaker, that Russia has come here forever and irrevocably. That is far from certain. Ukraine has launched a counter-offensive in the south, slowly gaining ground. But the biggest fight remains in the east. The Battle of Severodonetsk reportedly involves thousands of troops. This unverified video purports to show ferocious street-to-street fighting, where every step these Ukrainian soldiers take comes with a risk of death. Roughly 500 civilians are trapped inside a chemical plant, and bridges out of the city have been destroyed. Farmers in parts of Ukraine can't work their fields, and those who can struggle to get grain to market because of Russia's naval blockade. As Julie Wong explains, there's worry that could extend the death toll from this war far beyond Ukraine's borders.
Ukraine is one of the top exporters of wheat globally. But the war has made it tricky to not only grow, but get that and other grains out. Devastating for countries that rely on it.
We see shortage of food in many parts of the world, especially in the Sahel of Africa, the Horn of Africa, and other populous countries that depend on wheat as a staple of food.
Ukraine normally ships grains out through the Black Sea, but Russian blockades have held up more than 20 million tons of it, driving prices up around the world. A UN report projects 47 million people could face starvation this year because of the war in Ukraine.
Russia's illegal actions that are not just putting democracy and Ukrainians at risk, but are directly leading to food insecurity.
Africa heavily relies on Russia and Ukraine for wheat. The chairman of the African Union, also the president of Senegal, met Vladimir Putin earlier this month to discuss the crisis. Putin blames Western sanctions for the shortages, though Western sanctions have not targeted food. Sunday, Ukraine said it will move grain out through Poland and Romania.
We found two routes. We established two routes which help us export these agricultural commodities.
And a third Baltic route is being looked at, but how much will get through is unclear. On Rosemary Barton Live, a grain marketing association said Canadian farmers are trying to fill the gap.
Farmers are going to try and produce as much as they possibly can by using the latest technology and adding whatever they can to that to try and produce as much per acre as possible.
Global food insecurity will likely be on the agenda when the G7 leaders meet in Germany at the end of June. Julia Wong, CBC News, Ottawa.
We mentioned Russia Day. It was also celebrated in Ottawa on Friday with a party at the Russian Embassy, which was attended by an official from Global Affairs Canada. After the Globe and Mail reported on that visit, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs released a statement saying it was unacceptable, never should have happened, and that Canada continues to stand with Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Global Affairs Canada tells CBC News tonight the decision was made by the department and won't happen again. As the third school year upended by COVID wraps up, we're learning more about the high cost to Canada's school kids. Tonight in our special series, Learning Curve, Deanna Sumanak-Johnson examines the effects of delayed physical education.
The activities they're trying out are new, but they bring back the familiar joy of moving around with friends, something kids haven't had a lot of since the pandemic began.
Yeah, I did stuff by myself and with my family. We'd go on bike rides and stuff, but I wouldn't see my friends. We wouldn't go play basketball with my friends. Parks were closed, everything. So it took a toll on me when I couldn't do it.
I do feel a change. Well, other than feeling more active than I was during online, I feel I have a better state of mind.
While lags in math and literacy as a result of the pandemic disruptions to learning have garnered much attention, the potential lag in kids' physical activity isn't talked about as much. Screen time and sedentary lifestyle were already big problems before the pandemic. But according to a study, once the pandemic broke out, only 3% of Canadian kids met the guidelines on movement, screen time, and sleep. After the kids returned to in-person schooling, that figure rose, but only slightly, to between 5 and 6%.
The physical inactivity and increased screen time should really be considered a collateral consequence of the pandemic for these kids. And children may be less fit as a result of being less active. They may also be experiencing higher levels of depression and anxiety as a result of the pandemic.
The remedy, experts say, is both at home and at school. This Toronto school has resumed its popular Spring Wellness Week with new activities like juggling and learning to play cricket.
So cricket has both the physical element of it, running, catching, fielding. The one additional element that the cricket brings is the strategy.
And there's a strategy experts recommend for families too. Build in unstructured, fun activities like taking a walk after dinner or biking, as the slow crawl out of the pandemic hopefully builds to a speedier jog. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
And we have more on our series about the pandemic's effects on Canadian students on our website. For more on how students across Canada have been affected by the pandemic and how we can help them recover, go to cbc.ca/learning curve. Justin Bieber shocked his fans when he announced that facial paralysis was behind the cancellation of some Toronto concerts.
As you can see, this eye is not blinking. I can't smile on this side of my face.
Up next, we'll speak to an expert about the rare neurological illness affecting the Canadian star. Plus, a little later. An Ontario family denied the chance to say goodbye to a loved one.
I would have held her. I would have held her so tight, just let her know that she's loved.
A CBC News investigation looks at why it took nearly a month before a woman's death in long-term care was reported to her family. And
we got a mysterious package in the post, and when we opened it, we found that it contained this book.
From Canada to the UK, the library book that was returned almost half a century later. We'll be right back.
CBC News, The National, named Canada's best national newscast at the Canadian Screen Awards.
Parts of southern Alberta are bracing for drenching rain over the next few days. Environment Canada is warning that 75 to 150 millimeters of rain could fall in the eastern slopes of the Rockies by Wednesday morning. Calgary, which saw that major flooding back in 2013, is already preparing, reducing the water in the Glenmore Reservoir so it can hold more of what's to come. A lot of people have been trying to learn more about the medical ailment that Justin Bieber has after the singer released a video showing his face is partially paralyzed.
Ramsay Hunt syndrome, and it is from this virus that attacks the nerve in my ear and my facial nerves.
Bieber shocked fans by abruptly canceling a Toronto concert on Wednesday. He revealed his condition on Instagram 2 days later. Ramsay Hunt syndrome can cause severe ear pain, even hearing loss. Well, here to shed some light on this is Dr. Matthew Burke, a neurologist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre in Toronto. And Dr. Burke, let me start with the simplest question. What is Ramsay Hunt syndrome?
Thanks, Ian. So obviously, excellent question here. So Ramsay Hunt syndrome is caused by the reactivation of the varicella zoster virus. This is the same virus that causes chickenpox, and basically it lays dormant in the nervous system, and then at times, rarely, it can reactivate. And in the Ramsay Hunt syndrome, it reactivates and causes irritation and inflammation of the facial nerve that causes some of the dramatic things we've been seeing with regards to facial paralysis and other symptoms.
You said rarely. How rare is this syndrome?
Yeah, it is quite rare. Estimates in the U.S. suggest it's 5 to 10 per 100,000 people per year. So it is really quite rare.
How serious can this syndrome be?
Yeah, so it's variable. It really varies patient to patient. The majority of patients, if treated quickly, usually considered quickly within the first 3 days since symptom onset, the majority of those patients can have a full recovery, at least suggested by a large previous retrospective study. But it really is variable. In some patients, that could take weeks, it could take months, and in some patients, they might not fully recover, and it really could be a long run.
So with that relatively small window before getting treatment, what should, as rare as this is, what should people know about seeking treatment if they start noticing the kind of symptoms that Justin Bieber showed in his video?
Yeah, so obviously if you have, acute onset new neurological symptoms, you need to present to the emergency department for evaluation quickly. Obviously something like facial paralysis is severe. I'm not sure if he also presented with ear pain and kind of blistering lesions in the ear. But whenever you have a new neurological deficit, it's always better to get it checked out. And then usually the treatment would begin in the emerge, which is typically antiviral agents as well as anti-inflammatory agents through steroids like prednisone.
Yeah, and facial paralysis, of course, can be a symptom of a lot of things, including strokes. Yes. And again, the thing is to get to the emerge, as you say, as quickly as possible. Listen, I've read a lot of speculation on social media, which, often isn't worth very much, but I do want to ask you, speculation linking Ramsay Hunt syndrome with COVID vaccines. Is there any merit to that?
So, at this point in time, it's hard to draw any strong conclusion, that's for sure. You'll see a few cases reported in the literature, but certainly no definitive or strong associations that have been seen. The broader umbrella and related conditions like Bell's palsy, there have been definitely a few cases, but to suggest that this would be caused by the COVID vaccine, I think would be certainly a bit of a stretch at this point. But, obviously this is a complicated topic.
Well, and part of the theory in some of these posts is that there has been a spike in cases of Ramsay Hunt syndrome, at least in your practice at your hospital. Have you seen any noticeable increase in cases?
Not really. Against, I meet with my colleagues in neurology on a weekly basis. There haven't been any discussions of surges of, Ramsay Hunt cases. And, sometimes these patients are seen just directly in the emerge, and I haven't, spoken with my emerge colleagues. But definitely nothing to report from me or my colleagues in neurology that I'm aware of.
You are cautious in your analysis and you're complete. And Dr. Burke, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And U.S. country music star Toby Keith also revealed a serious health issue this weekend. In a short statement on Instagram, Keith said he'd been diagnosed with stomach cancer last fall and that he's been receiving treatment for the past 6 months, adding, "So far, so good." The Queen is now the second longest reigning monarch in modern times, just days after the end of her Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Today marks 70 years and 126 days since her coronation. That means she's inched out Thailand's late king, who died in 2016. The Queen will have to reign for roughly 2 more years to beat the record holder, Louis XIV of France. And Ontario families demanding answers about why it took nearly a month before they learned about the death of a loved one in a long-term care facility.
It makes me so angry to think that she died alone and that her body sat in the morgue for a month.
Coming up, a CBC News investigation into why her family wasn't given the chance to say goodbye. Plus, how much longer will the travel chaos continue? Our panel looks at whether new measures at the airport will work. Tonight, CBC News investigates the heartbreaking situation faced by an Ontario family. They want to know why it took nearly a month for them to find out that their loved one had died in a long-term care home. They say they only learned of their loss when London, Ontario police showed up 3.5 weeks later at the home where one of them used to live. Katie Nicholson meets family members who feel they missed their chance to say goodbye.
So at the center of this story is Melanie Barker. She had a difficult life and a lonely death. Back in February, she became acutely ill in her long-term care home and she died within days, alone. Thing is, her children and her sister tell us no one told them until March. So our first stop is her sister, Donna Barker.
There's not one thing that they can say to me that will justify her dying alone and her being put in the morgue for a month without any family. I had given them my number when I was down there, that if anything needed to be, like anything, I'm her sister, please contact me. But come on, people, she's dying. Contact one of us, you know?
Melanie Barker, mother of 5, spent more than a decade in long-term care because of a debilitating physical illness. Barker's family didn't visit very often, but they say they loved her. And there were periods of estrangement as they all worked through serious intergenerational trauma.
We were very badly abused as children, and both physically, emotionally, sexually. We never knew about each other's situation until after my father died. And that's when we started talking about it. So our whole upbringing was basically very volatile. So, yeah.
Have you thought about what you would have said to her?
I would have held her. I would have held her so tight, just let her know that she's loved, no matter what life did to us, no matter how bad our life was, and the things we had to do to survive in our own ways, that she was loved.
So what happened? Why didn't the care home contact the family? This is the long-term care home where Melanie Barker lived and died. So they won't do an on-camera interview. So what I'm doing is I'm emailing them a list of questions, and I'm also sending questions to the Public Guardian and Trustee's office. It was overseeing Melanie Barker's property and also her care decisions. So what long-term care experts have told us is that both the long-term care home and the Public Guardian and Trustee's office should have had family contact information on file, and they should have been keeping it up to date. So, and sent.
Our next stop is to pick up Melanie's half-sister. Now, she's been helping her niece try to get answers. This family's been through so much that they've never actually met in person before.
How are you? Good, how are you? This is the first time you're going to meet Shelley in person, too.
Yeah. Is that crazy?
So what's that like for you?
It's exciting. Like I'm really happy.
I wonder what your mother would have thought of you guys meeting today like this.
Mom would have liked that. She was a little bit wild and crazy, though.
They have some notes in her recreation and nature profile. It talks about the fact that she got a sociology degree, that sort of thing. Right?
Yeah.
Smart woman.
Fucking brilliant.
She's a very, very intelligent woman.
Mm-hmm. She graduated high school when she was 15, and then she was supposed to go to college, and then she got married to my dad.
But she found her way back to education, to pursue that, and very honorable to do that. Not easy.
Melanie Barker may have been smart, but she could also be cruel.
it was her way or the highway, and she was always right, and she wasn't nice. But then there's other things like she took me to see Les Miserables when I was a kid, and she took me to see the Phantom of the Opera, and like always music and always just something to distract her. I think distract herself from what she'd been through, right? Like regardless, right? Like whether or not I'd been there for the last few years, like I was dealing with my own trauma and drug use and everything, like, and I've just gotten clean, so I'm trying to put my life back together. And so like, no, I didn't go and see her, and I should have. 100,000% I should have gone to see her, because regardless of anything she did, nothing was that bad that she deserved to die alone like that. Like,
so, I mean, just to go through those dates again, February 9th, 2022, that's when we know, again, she's palliative.
Yeah.
She's aspirated, and then she dies February 12th. I mean, there's a couple of days in there. There's a window for everyone to be notified.
Yeah.
Right?
I would have expected a call would have gone to her children immediately, so they could have their opportunity to make peace with their mom. They deserve that. If they wanted to take it, perfect. If they didn't, perfect. But they missed out on that opportunity. But then it carries on, right? She passes. No one's reaching out. Then they send her to a morgue, and then she's forgotten again.
But how did that happen? Especially since Melanie Barker's long-term care records list 2 names of family members. In fact, Shelley's name and number appear on the chart. And it turns out she's pretty easy to find online. Dr. Samir Sinha is a Canadian leader in geriatrics, palliative, and long-term care.
What do you think of this case?
It doesn't sound like the Public Guardian and Trustee's office here was operating to the level that we expect it to be. It doesn't sound like the home did the due diligence that they needed to be doing. And hey, you know, this family, complicated, I get it. That's their right to be complicated. It's their right to have complex family dynamics. But in this case, it seems like somehow there was information on the chart of family members willing to be contacted. It's really hard to bring closure to the family when from their standpoint, we were calling, we were reaching out. And I think that only brings added pain to this family, because this was a tragedy of errors, really, more than anything.
This shouldn't have happened. It makes me so angry to think that she died alone and that her body sat in the morgue for a month. There's no justification for that.
Okay, it took a while, but I have answers to some, but definitely not all of our questions.
Okay, what have you got?
All right, so both the Public Guardian Trustee's office and the long-term care home said that they couldn't speak to the specifics of the case, but we knew that was going to happen anyway. But here's what they could say. So the Public Guardian and Trustee's office says it makes reasonable efforts to identify family and its records are updated, but it's not mandated to search for family.
All right, and what does the long-term care home say?
The long-term care home says if it becomes aware of incorrect information, it asks the resident or whoever is in charge of the resident's care decisions to provide updated information.
That's the Public Guardian Trustee's office, right?
Right. So they both seem to be saying that they followed process while kind of pointing fingers at each other. So what are you looking for in terms of a place for your mother?
I'd rather have her close by so I can actually go visit her like I didn't when she was here, right? So I think it'll bring me some peace and hopefully some relief from the guilt that I feel over it. So I hope it helps.
There's a relief too in sharing her story in hopes the same thing doesn't happen to others.
Look, there's a deer right there, a whole bunch of them right there. Like, that's just beautiful. I think she'd enjoy it here. I think she'd be at peace.
Katie Nicholson reporting from our investigative unit. And one final note, the family says it's deciding whether to launch a formal complaint with the Ontario Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Long lines and delays at Canadian airports have been frustrating travelers for weeks now and pushed some to the breaking point.
This is the worst airport on earth. I'm telling you, there's no other airport like this.
Coming up, 2 industry executives tell us whether new measures, some in effect this weekend, are making a difference. But first, we want to take a moment to tell you about something that happened this weekend. The National was honored at the Radio Television Digital News Association Awards. 3 residential school survivors shared their emotional stories with us in the wake of discoveries at the Kamloops Residential School.
I am survivor of the Kamloops Indian Residential School.
This piece was awarded Best Opinion. The National also won in the Best Breaking News category for our coverage of the deadly, devastating BC floods last November.
Is this the day I'm done?
And finally, the program was awarded Best Newscast for our coverage of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. As always, thanks for watching.
Think your family's ready to make it to Fast Money for a chance at $10,000? Then apply now and see if you've got what it takes, and you could win big.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's Daily News podcast, Front Burner, we try to get to the bottom of the massive delays and chaos at Canada's airports. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. With the travel season getting busier, pressure is growing to finally fix delays at some Canadian airports, especially Toronto's Pearson International, where long lineups, overwhelmed staff, and flight cancellations were recently documented by a podcaster and former NHL player in a video now seen millions of times.
There is a 400-person line with 2 Air Canada workers. There's 1 million canceled flights. Everyone's just panicking.
Now, a few new measures to speed things up have been announced since Whitney's now famous rant: the hiring of hundreds more security and customs staff, and the temporary suspension of random COVID testing. The head of the International Air Transport Association says the problem really is that Canada waited too long to gear up for the travel surge.
We warned many governments ahead of time, and unfortunately, many governments just did not listen to us, and now they're suffering. And the Canadian government is one of them.
Even with the new measures, experts say the travel chaos could continue for months. Well, here are two people who can give us an inside look at what's happening in the travel industry in Canada. Deborah Flint is the president and CEO of the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, and Andy Gibbons is the VP of Government Relations at WestJet. And the first question is to you, Deborah. Have you seen an impact yet in Toronto from the removal of random COVID testing for arriving passengers?
Friday's announcement was very important, a big step forward in the travel process, and we have seen some improvement as a result of that announcement. There is much more to go. There are many other processes still in the system related to health verification, and so we look forward to continuing to work with the government on those ideas that can smooth it out. But Friday's step was absolutely imperative and has had a positive impact on the process already.
Andy, few things more frustrating than arriving from a long international flight and being stuck on the plane for another, I don't know, hour or two, which was happening. Is that still happening?
It is still happening, but the good news, Ian, is that there's been major improvements in this area. And a full credit to Deborah and her team and the CBSA. So while we are still holding some flights, unfortunately, the length of these holds has decreased dramatically. So we are making progress. We are not there yet. Gate holds are not okay in our business, and they're not okay for the traveler, but the situation is improving.
There are a lot of issues going on at airports, like the waits for security, which in some cases are longer than most people remember. Deborah, there are a lot of travelers watching who have summer plans, and they want to know if they're in Toronto, for example, what can they expect at Pearson over the next few weeks?
We can expect that things have dramatically will improve based on, again, retooling of the processing, increasing of staffing. The waits and the hold on boards are going to diminish. We've seen that already at the CATSA security lines to leave domestically or internationally to fly. But it is going to be a very challenging summer. The industry is restarting. It is a challenging, very complex industry. So the summer is going to be challenged, and there will still be waits, but nothing near as extreme as what we've seen before. And we'll continue to work every day with our partners to ideate and solution how to make that better.
Andy, you deal with Canadian airports right across the country, and I know, just even from my own family members, people just aren't sure when to get to the airport in order to have enough time to get on the plane. What do you say to them?
Two things. One, check the website, check the CATSA website, make sure you've got the most up-to-date information, and we're updating that regularly. And also be patient, truly. You know, everyone in government, everyone in our sector is absolutely 24/7 in solving this crisis on behalf of Canadians and visitors. So I think the situation, just like gate holds, Ian, is improving at CATSA, and the screening situation is getting better, and there are hundreds of officers that are coming on board. So we're tracking well so far. We're not there yet.
Andy, tell me about staffing, whether it's people who are moving baggage or checking in or, the flight crews themselves. What are you facing on a day-to-day basis?
Probably no different than other consumer-facing sectors across the economy. I think the difference for us in terms of service levels that the government is providing and also our vendors is the mandates. The mandates are at the heart of these challenges because it's leaving hundreds and hundreds of aviation-related employees at home. So we do think those mandates should come down, Ian, and we're hopeful for government movement in this pretty soon.
And Deborah, what needs to change over the next few weeks or months to make the customer experience, the traveler experience at Pearson better?
We're going to continue to work on that travel experience. We have delivered for many years one of the best experiences for airports in North America, award-winning, and we want to get back to that. We're going to continue to collaborate with the government, and we've provided ideas collectively across the system how we can make the experience better. Continuing to refine the health-related processes. Again, even though yesterday or Friday was a great movement, there's much more to do that can improve the processes and ensure that staffing across all the parts of the airport, it is an ecosystem of many companies and many government agencies that all need to be a strong link to make the travel experience one that's predictable, reliable, and expedient, as well as an enjoyable one, as it should be.
Andy, a lot of people have been wondering about the number of passengers. Are we exceeding what it was like in, January of 2020, in other words, pre-pandemic, or are we still below that level? Because a lot of people are kind of wondering, why is the system having such a hard time?
I think that's one of the reasons we're frustrated and have been for many, many months, is that if you look at June, and I'm just speaking for WestJet, we will be flying 100% of the available seats we did in June 2019. In May, it was 85%. So we will be, humming this summer. Our planes will be full of happy travelers, but there's nothing special about the numbers that we're offering the market this summer. It is consistent with this summer before the pandemic.
Lots of issues here, complex. I don't have to tell you guys how complex your business is. Thanks for speaking with us this evening, and hopefully I can check back with you in a few weeks.
Thank you, Ian.
How far would you go to return an overdue library book?
Hang on a minute. This was due back in 1974.
A BC man didn't let decades or an ocean get in his way. That's next. What's the longest you've had an overdue library book? A couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks? How about nearly 50 years? A library in the UK was surprised to find a book in the mail that had been shipped from Port Moody, British Columbia, overdue by about 48 years. The story of the Great Return is our moment.
We got a mysterious package in the post, and when we opened it, we found that it contained this book. Pulled it out of the envelope, had a look at it and went, hang on a minute, this was due back in 1974. This is something slightly out of the ordinary. Tooting Library has had books come back from Greece and I think New Zealand. But normally what happens is it's somebody that's a local resident who's moved away.
It was our local library in London. I was going through an old box we'd been carrying with us since we moved here in the 70s. Opened it up, and then in the middle of it was this book, which I had no recollection of ever taking out, no recollection of reading, so it's not mine. So I wanted them to have it back.
He may have been worried about the fine potentially, which I think if you calculate it on a strict day-by-day basis is somewhere in the vicinity of £6,000. Fortunately, we cap our fines at £8.50. It seemed a bit unreasonable to charge a fine given that he'd gone to all of the trouble of sending it back from Canada, so we waived the fines anyway.
I can so relate to this. I'm the worst procrastinator I know. I also thought it'd be a good idea to write a book and call it Overdue, but I haven't got around to it. That is The National for June 12th. Good night.